All right. Well, my clock says 9:01, so I think we might be okay to start. And we don't want to miss out on any of this really great content that we have today. We are so happy to have FEMA here with us to do this complex projects and site inspection training. We're lucky to have them. This is something new that they're doing, and I'm really glad that they're here to train us and guide us. One last time, please take up in the upper right-hand corner of your name on your box, click more, then click the rename, add your first, last name, and organization, and also put that information into the chat room. We have a great group of people here from FEMA. Like I said, we're very lucky to have their partnership and having them help us with this PA and this training and all of the hard work that they're doing. We really appreciate it. Today, we're going to have Christine Aronson, Kevin Helland, and Carrie Gay from FEMA doing our training for us. And we are going to first turn it over to Christina. But before I do, I want you to make sure that you put all your questions that you have in the chat room. We're going to hold off until the end of each person's presentation portion to answer those questions, but we don't want you to forget the questions, and we want to know what questions you have and concerns you have so that we can address them. So please start putting those as we go in the chat room, and then we will address them and bring them to Christina's attention at the end of her presentation, and the same after the others have presented as well. Oh yes, Christina, you do have control of the screen. Your presentation's already up there. So I'm going to turn over to Christina, and I'm going to leave it to all of our presenters today to give a little bit of information about themselves, what they do for FEMA, because I think they can present themselves much better than I could at this point. So Christina, off to you.
Thanks, Kathy. I appreciate it. Welcome. This is a pilot presentation. I'm super excited, but nervous. I am Christina Aronson. I'm a California licensed civil and structural engineer. I've been with FEMA about 6 years, doing 406 and PA mitigation and building science engineering piece. I practiced in California, designed schools and restaurants. My most memorable projects were the Northridge earthquake. I was there as a private engineer. It was life-changing. My other big project is a 9-story senior citizen housing unit in Burbank. And then I don't know if you guys are old enough, but do you remember Miami Vice? So I designed the boathouse in Florida for the show, and they come racing around the boat, and the boat comes into the house, and when it shoots the fake front of the boat out, and we explode the building. So it was way fun. I have this really cool picture of this building on fire, and then they pack it all back down and they blow it up again. So it's not there anymore, but it was way fun. So that's who I am. I've been working on the Magna earthquake side for the whole year on the FEMA side, worked with public assistance on the PDAs, the preliminary damage assessments, and then on the appeal and all of that. So I dream about your buildings at night. So our goal on this one is to empower the applicants and their engineers so that you can make informed decisions on your projects, not for just this event, but also future events. We feel like this, FEMA doesn't want to hold up recovery, but it takes us a while to get here. I mean, it took us a year or 9 months. So we feel like, you can get to have more resiliency, you can achieve more during the initial recovery, even before a major disaster declaration is approved, if you kind of know what decisions you're making and what risks you're taking. Please, please, please bear with me. It's really hard to talk to with not a lot of faces. So if you'd love to come on screen, I would love to have you. I've got 3 screens, so my head's gonna be bobbing. And then put questions in the chat. If it's, super like, oh my God, I can't see your screen and I'm doing something stupid, please just pop in and say, hey, Christina, because this is my first one. Okay, ready. So everything that you see today is going to be in this document here, this PA Public Assistance Program and Policy Guide. Version 4 is your set of rules. I put the links in the chat. We're going to give you the presentation after. And you can always find it on FEMA.gov. There's a lot of super good information. We call it the PAPPG. You know, we have acronyms for acronyms. And I would say that terms and words matter. I'm going to try to translate them, but I'm also going to familiarize them so you build that vocabulary. It's lingo, it's vocabulary. And you say improved to FEMA, a FEMA person, they're going to think something that you may not think. Okay, so just phrasing that, holding that out there. Recently with the Disaster Recovery Reform Act, they updated the codes and standards issue, and public assistance has this interim policy of what consensus-based codes and standards we will fund automatically. There's always a caveat, so just hold that in your mind. Everything is based on the Stafford Act and then the Disaster Recovery Reform Act of 2018. Section 406 of the Stafford Act is public assistance. So just kind of know that in your head. It provides assistance to eligible state, local, tribal, and territorial stakeholders as a result of the presidentially declared disaster. So the public assistance, PA funding reimburses costs to repair publicly owned and some private nonprofit facilities to pre-disaster condition. In some cases, this funding may also include the consensus-based codes and standards upgrades. Upgrades is a good word, which may or may not do the national hazard mitigation. So basically, this is a grant program. So the law is Stafford Act, the regulations are the Code of Federal Regulations, and then the PAPPG is the policy guide. Laws, regulations, and policy. So holy cow, you've been through the ringer. The applicants have been like, this is the whole process, right? It's all about the process. And you're actually here. We've done RSMs. We're trying to get the projects, the damage into projects and start doing virtual site inspections in today's COVID environment. You are really making progress. While most of what you've done is administrative, there's also the physical construction piece and potential mitigation opportunities to consider to get actual recovery. So yeah, you've been doing forms and meetings and documents and of course grants portal, which isn't as bad as some of the other things we've had. So I kind of like grants portal. So engineers, I know we invited the Structural Engineers Association of Utah, and I so appreciate them coming. We really could use your help, and the applicants could use your help. And there is ways to be reimbursed. Kevin Helland will talk about this more later, but it's just different way of keeping which buckets of money to bill, kind of like, billing, normal billing, and making sure that you have the proper procurement. I wanted to just flag that professional services can be funded by FEMA, but there are rules, and you've got local engineers and construction professionals are huge assets in knowing what works for Utah, right? How do you rebuild? What is available? Those are critical. I mean, you guys know how to fix your own projects, and so we're trying to make sure that we get with appropriate construction. So our goal is to set Utah's recovery up for success. So talked about Northridge. This is, I bet you've never seen Concrete Bend. This is parking structure in Northridge at I think at the Fashion Square. This is Bullock's at the Fashion Square in the bottom middle. And then the bottom left is, a not very confined concrete column where all the ties blew out and the rebar's bent. The point is, it's a physical project, and we want to get the engineering solution to fit in the policy so that you build back, gathering as much of FEMA's, using as much of the FEMA different policies to work for you, to get as much funding as you can, so that we end up more resilient. So this is what I think is how you do it. There's steps that you're going to go. I mean, you see it in the grants portal. The Stafford Act was not written by construction professionals, and the FEMA's Public Assistance Policy Guide, PAPPG, was not either for the most part. We do have a wide variety, but there's a lot of rules for to do a grant, a lot of paper rules and procurement and all that piece. And we have to provide a program and a balanced recovery with responsible management of taxpayer dollars. So our goal is to try to get the engineering solution that addresses the cause of the damage to fit within policy. So it's one grant. It's a public assistance grant. And then there's a bunch of different pieces of it, okay? So in the public assistance, the PA, remember I said it restores to pre-disaster. So it's the repair portion of the project. And basically you have to capture the restore to pre-disaster condition. We're gonna talk about it, but pretty much exactly, so that, because if you've missed something like, oh, I didn't capture the gravel for the gravel road, and you don't get that funding, then that affects all of your other funding down the road, because like the 406 mitigation program is based on a percentage of that first disaster scope of work, restore to pre-disaster. There's another rule, if you're unable to restore to pre-disaster condition, then you restore to pre-disaster design and function. So that's, if it was a school and it was designed for 100 students and it's done, it's damaged beyond repair, then we would replace the funding for the replacement facility is necessary for the 100 students. Even if more than 100 students were attending the school prior to the incident, if it was designed for 100 students, that's what is the restore to pre-disaster form and function. If it's a bridge and now the channel widened permanently, Mother Nature has spoken, and so you may need a longer bridge now because to cross that opening. But if it's a one-lane bridge each way, you're still going to get a one-lane bridge each way. That's the form and function. It's a bridge and it's one lane each way. There's another good example about the office building in the PAPPG. So say you've got to capture that restore to pre-disaster cost, because that's what things are based on, even if you're not going to put it back that way. On the next step is okay, now, do codes and standards apply? Well, local codes and standards, if they're more restrictive and there's criteria, rules of how you use them, if they're adopted, does it, excuse me, does it applied uniformly, So go look at the rules. Under the DRRA, now we fund for codes and standards based on the consensus-based codes and standards. And we are funding them now for buildings, the electric power, roads and bridges, portable water and wastewater facilities. And those, the codes and standards are listed in the policy. And I think it's attached that the state was going to provide you guys. So we're going to capture, okay, it's a bridge, or it's a building, and we're going to trigger whatever codes, or it's a bridge and we're going to get whatever code is required, and then figure out what that cost is. Then we have this 428 fixed cost program, and that's for super big, large projects, and it makes it super flexible. It has limitations. What it does for you is FEMA and the applicant and the state agree on a cost to put that back this is what we're going to give you for funding. This is what the funding is going to be. Then you agree on that early, and you don't, that's it. That's the funding. But if you then bring it in, if you've done construction for less than that, then you get to keep the money, and there's rules on how you can spend that money on other projects. Normally FEMA, it's only for large projects, which I think your PDMGs and stuff have talked about. There's a threshold, but normally you get paid on actuals. So we go through this process of A and B, and we get to C, and you get your grant, and then it's all based on estimates. And when you go out and at the end, you resubmit all your invoices and documentation, and you get reimbursed on actuals. So this 428 fixed cost program, sorry, I'm not used to talking so much all the time. I know that's hard to believe, Kathy. This program gives you some more opportunity to use that money and be efficient in the dollars and settle up front, basically. So then this is my favorite program. This is the 406 PA portion of the project, and we're going to talk about it it's in more specifics. It has rules. You've heard 15%, 100% BCA. What it is, it's additional funding for mitigation measures accomplished during repairs. It is damaged this time. How do we prevent it from being damaged again? It's all, again, the applicants know how to do it. It's the applicant's proposal. You know what best works. It's based on repair costs before any insurance deductions. So even if your damage here and restored to pre-disaster was $100,000 or $110,000, and your deductible is $100,000, okay, then so you're really only out of pocket 10, you can get money for the 406 mitigation, PA mitigation based on the $110,000 damage. It has to be technically feasible. It has to work. It has the engineers, I'm going to ask, is this going to reduce or eliminate damage in a similar future event? Doesn't have to eliminate, it just has to reduce. Has to be cost effective. And there's certain things, pretty much anything can be 15%. We can add on 15% for this, that, and the other kind of trial. We think this might work. The 100% rule are in Appendix J of the PAPPG, and those are, if your damage is $100,000, your eligible damages, then you could upgrade another $100,000. Or in the case of, say, if you were going to do a culvert and that was $100,000, then you could spend $200,000 on a bridge. Now I said spend and all those things, and that was really simple, but what it is not a block grant. It's not a budget. It has to be a complete scope of work and be able to stand on its own. And I can't fund 50 feet of riprap if you need 100 feet of riprap. And then there's no adverse up or downstream impacts or any other adverse effects, which brings up EHP and my little note at the bottom. Environmental historic preservation, laws, regulation, and policies, all of the PA public assistance funding has to comply with all of those things, which may be a little different than normal, but and you've seen, that's why we're asking about the age of the buildings, and you guys have some beautifully historic buildings. So all of that comes into effect. 406 mitigation, and we're going to talk about these kind of examples. It can be added on. It can add to or revise the repair to pre-disaster. If you're going to say upsize a culvert from a 24 to 36, the 406 mitigation is that delta cost. It can be backed into, remember I talked about having informed decision-making early on. So if you go ahead and fix it because FEMA's not there right away, and you say, well, gosh darn it, I'm just not going to put it back to the way it was. I'm going to make it back, put it back better, track the costs, and we'll try to back into it. And that's a very official term, back into it. And then you can replace the whole scope of work as in, say, a culvert to a whole bridge. So right now you're in this process with the PDMG and the PA repair portion of the project. Since you're stepping through here, 406 PA mitigation, we've engaged you in the A through C and D part of this. Once in the process wise, once you submit to the Consolidated Resource Center and it comes out of the Consolidated Resource Center, and that's when we actually have the eligible costs and scope now finally accepted by FEMA, then that's when it'll come to our 406 PA mitigation queue. And this is where we will finalize things. And then after the 406 mitigation queue is the environmental historic preservation. And they should be involved all through A through D as well. But that's when they actually have to do certain checks and timings and I don't know what else, wave their magic wand. That's process again. Physical project wise, over here on this past E is what you want to build. If you want to build a fairy godmother castle kind of thing, that's where over here. So anything that is not eligible on your project after 406 PA mitigation, any of those remaining line items become improved project. Okay, there's the lingo again, improved project. Those have rules, they're capped. Those line items just aren't funded by FEMA. So A, B, C, that's very linear, and I'm an engineer, I'm very linear, but you get to do mix the steps kind of, and you don't always do every step. So this I'm super excited about. It's hot off the press, the building public assistance and the building science, which is part of mitigation at headquarters. We all came up with this actual flow chart with codes and standards and floodplain ordinances and all of that. It gets to be a mess. So we kind of stopped and tried to think it through. This will be on FEMA.gov. It is in your attachments that the state provided. It's a front and back. So there's a lot of ifs, ands, or buts on the back. So buildings are unique, and we start up here in the gray box in the top kind of middle third. And it is this damaged facility, which is what FEMA calls the site or the building or whatever. That's kind of the term. Is it a building? And if not, then these are not the droids you're looking for. Do not go. This flow chart is not applicable. But no matter what, you need to check the floodplain first. So blue is for water. Is it in the special flood hazard area? These are synonyms: special flood hazard area, floodplain. Kathy is really super, super awesome at this. I've heard wonderful things about her. Is it the 100-year flood, right? The 100-year flood. All of those things are synonymous. So if it is in the special flood hazard area, then you have to talk to your local floodplain administrator. You may need to get a permit. There's rules, okay? If it's damaged, you need to walk through and see if it complies already with, well, we're talking a damaged site. Does your building comply with the local ordinance or not? If it's yes, then A-okay, move on to the next step. If it's no, then we need to do a substantial damage determination, okay? That's based on NFIP rules, and if it is substantially damaged, then you need to incorporate the flood provisions. Even though this may be an earthquake, this is a wind event, you still need to upgrade to the flood provisions. Okay, then, and I'm starting to see your questions, so I'll try to work those into. So it complies, and we're not going to have to do the floodplain upgrades. we're going to go to the green, and that's the structural piece. That's the IEBC, International Existing Building Code. And basically, FEMA addresses damage. We don't, if it becomes an alteration or a change of occupancy or any of those that the International Existing Building Code addresses, that becomes in that approved lane, in that approved project lane. It's different. There's other kinds of projects for that. We're dealing with Chapter 4 and repairs. So that is like a whole 2 pages. It deals in the International Existing Building Code for wind, seismic, snow, flood, okay? Repairs is important. So the alterations, additions, change of occupancy does not apply. So if this event is an earthquake, so does the building have structural damage? Is it an is it an earthquake? Yes, okay, so then I'm gonna go do the substantial structural damage analysis for the earthquake. So that would be doing the disproportionate earthquake damage analysis based on the ground motion at the event and how damaged the vertical elements of the lateral load resisting system. What does that mean? That means the columns, the walls, the structural elements that are helping with the earthquake. In a building, you have, just like you have certain things that help you just stand up on a day-to-day basis. And then you have other systems that transfer the loads for an earthquake or wind to make it resist that side-to-side kind of motion, okay? So if those vertical elements are significantly damaged, that's a really a potential, it's a nice threshold. It also tells you that when the vertical elements are vulnerable, then that can cause pancake, sudden, brittle collapse more than, say, another failure mechanism, which say bending and you're going to have it creak and groan and moan and say get out kind of failure mechanism. That's what it's based on. So we didn't want to avoid these sudden brittle collapses. So that's part of the trigger, is how damaged are these vertical elements of the lateral load resisting system. Then you have to do a compliance evaluation and see how that works. And this is why we need you engineers to do this for the applicants. And this is fundable. The whole International Existing Building Code is based on the idea that it's, we want to use and reuse existing buildings, but we also want to have require reasonable upgrades over time and things that we learn. So the non-compliance switch becomes a toggle. It requires, if that is triggered for seismic, then it requires repair and retrofit. You can't put the building back to pre-disaster because you have to do this repair and the retrofit. Now, if that becomes structural and you start messing with the guts of the building, and so that's part of the PA portion, that codes and standards piece of the grant. So we're back to the chart and we say substantial structural damage. Is it triggered? Yes. Then it has requirements for structural improvements beyond the pre-disaster condition, which may require retrofit of undamaged structural elements. It could be wind and snow also have triggers, and I'm kind of an earthquake girl, so I haven't quite worked out all the wind and snow rules. What happens also it's important to note that in chapter 4 of repairs, it talks about some electrical, some mechanical, some, like if you have glazing next to a door that should be, can't think of the word, but where it does not jagged, then that glazing should be replaced with appropriate. So there are certain things in chapter 4 that you will have to upgrade if it's damaged, but it's always the damaged element. So now we're done with the green, and let's say it's not in the floodplain. It's a building, but it's not in the floodplain. And it is not substantially structurally damaged. So then we go over to no. Well, is it damaged? And is it damaged a lot though, but just not substantially damaged? Mostly in earthquakes, non-structural damage is your highest dollar amounts. So then are you interested in replacing the building? There is this repair versus replacement analysis. That's our funny 50% rule. And that's the red piece. And it is a very complex policy item. So you should be working with the PA and FEMA people to help you. It requires significant coordination. Basically, it says if it costs more, I mean, if we're already going to spend all this money on a building, you know, and it's more than just more than 50%, it's going to be so much money that it just makes sense to replace it and get a new building to full current code, then that's a possibility. So then you could replace the building, which would say, that's where it says design new building following policies and guidance in compliance of local building code or latest edition of model building codes, whichever is more hazard resistant. And then there's my favorite program is 406 hazard mitigation. If it's not, then we go back to our bubble chart and you can do 406 hazard mitigation on the pieces that are, you know, putting back better. If it's a suspended ceiling, you can put it back with all the normal bracing that you should have had over the years. So for any building, you check the floodplain, you go to the International Existing Building Code. There's caveat, historic may be different. It has different rules in the IEBC and it has different environmental historic preservation compliance issues. And then there is local codes if they're more stringent than what we already have. We're looking for resiliency, the natural hazard resistance. Okay, Kathy, I inserted this last night and I thinking that now might be a good time for questions.
Yeah.
I can see the chat.
Okay, I was gonna read them for you, but if you can see it, you go ahead.
I can see it. How does restoring to pre-disaster form and function build or ensure resiliency? Isn't FEMA all about building and ensuring resiliency? So I think that one's, I think I've gotten there. The restorative pre-disaster condition, the restorative pre-disaster form and function is a piece that is the balancing of the taxpayer dollars. And it's like the baseline of the grant. You have to have a starting point. That's kind of the way I look at it. Sometimes that's really all you need. I mean, any earthquake, no building is going to be earthquake proof, and you know, you're always in an earthquake, you're likely going to have damage because it's too expensive to build to be earthquake proof, right? That's not economical. So that's part of it. Does FEMA recognize the state adopted code, even if it's not the most current edition of the International Code Council codes? So on the specific facilities that I mentioned, they do, if it's more restrictive, because the whole ICC codes are supposed to be customized. So if you customize it and adopt it and enforce it and meet all the criteria of the local codes, there's 6 criteria now, and it's more restrictive, then yes, FEMA will recognize it. If it does, if it's not, then at the minimum, they require the ICC latest editions for those specific facility types. There are some hardship rules and that kind of thing because match still does apply, but those can be addressed one-on-one, project by project. Is there a deadline for application post-disaster? I'm gonna hold that one. Kathy, will you make a note and let Kevin Helland address that one, please? How can you use the latest building codes for a project designed and not be upgrading the facility? It doesn't seem to make sense. Okay. How can you use the latest building codes for a project design? I'm not sure about that one. Do you want to come on and ask me that?
Come on up, Will. We know it's you.
Yeah, be happy to ask that question. How can you take a building that was built in the 1970s and restore it to 1970s conditions, but have to use 2020 building codes and not be upgrading the building? It just doesn't make sense.
So if it's a, let's talk, it's a fire station, and it was built in the 1970s. And you guys have a lot of the concrete precast concrete T roof construction, and precast concrete columns. And in the 70s, that was super popular, and it's a known issue now that they don't have really positive connections. And so if the building if it was only a 4.2 earthquake and it didn't suffer any damage, then we leave it alone. If it was just some non-structural damage because it became a 5.2 earthquake and your ceilings collapsed, then just the suspended ceilings would be could be put back to current code under the 406 program, or better, because some things you just can't fix, right? If you have this beautiful plaster, that's hard to bring to current code. But the IEBC, the International Existing Building Code, the whole basis of that code is this issue of, as soon as you drive the car off the parking lot, it's a used car, right? As soon as you get beyond that first complaint, it doesn't. So it has these triggers, and it only requires certain things like the glazing and the mechanical and electrical, like the GR, I always say it backwards, the GRFI, like switches, the plugs that, when you water, if those were damaged, you'd have to put that back to current code. So it's on those 2 pages of repairs. And then the rest of the IEBC is based on, okay, well, gosh, it's not talking damage anymore. It's talking about alterations, or I'm going to change the use for the fire station to an office or whatever. Then those require more triggers. So yeah, it's an art. It's not a science. Does that sound reasonable? Whoops, you're on mute.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay. And DEM did some answering. Since we have these strong downslope damaging east winds or somewhat on a regular basis, I'd like to install wind speed measurement stations at different locations around the city to have better situation. Can you please address funding potential? Let's throw that to Kevin Helland, please. No fair, Kevin, you're getting tested early. You get to research your answers. Does FEMA recognize historic structures, and will they restore them to original condition? Hi, I know you, Greek Orthodox Church. We do recognize historic structures, and there are lots of rules, and FEMA does address that, and fully, yes. We want to, they have their own piece in the IEBC, and yeah, that's why we need engineers and design professionals engaged, and construction people. So yes, yes, and yes. Kevin, I see you came up. Do you want to talk a minute?
Yeah, taking the opportunity to just chime in here too. So yeah, back to the time limitations, and just I want to caveat in general here, what we're doing is we're going to save the chat and these questions, and so we can follow up if there are any questions that need a little more in-depth answering afterwards, and make that available. So because what I wanted to mention is is there deadlines? This is a federal grant, so there are all sorts of deadlines. And so that's kind of a nuanced question sometimes. So we want to make sure we follow up with that appropriately. And the answer that mitigation and recovery put in there, it applies to that initial deadline of requesting assistance, which is 30 days after the event is declared or your county is designated by the president. On the question about the wind speed measurement stations, that is not necessarily a public assistance eligible funding opportunity there. But that's not to say that there aren't some other programs that are attached to the disaster that could impact that. So Kathy and some of our other state partners on here are also part of the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program, which is additional money that's allocated to the state as a result of the public assistance program and any other programs there. So I'd encourage you, if you have those kinds of projects that aren't related to disaster damaged elements and facilities, please contact your state representation and Office of Emergency Management, and they will be happy to help you find the appropriate grant program to fit that need. And just to also reiterate on the historical buildings, if you're a registered facility, we do have some specific rules because we do have to comply with national historical registration requirements on there and how we do restore your building because it is a cultural, significant, and historic building that we want to make sure we try to preserve that building the best we can. It's all dependent on how the disaster impacted it there. So, and then I do want to just recap on the repair versus replacement and just caveat there. That is a very document intensive process. That is not just a simple, calculation that is on there. FEMA does actually go through quite an extensive review on those facilities if you choose to want to replace that. So if you're in that position where you've done some engineering analysis and you believe it might actually be more cost effective to just replace it than repair it, please engage your PDMG early on in that because we do have to go through quite the extensive review process on that. So,
hey Kevin, what's your PDMG?
Program Delivery Manager.
Thank you.
I'm as guilty of using acronyms and not explaining them out. So I apologize for that. Do
you want to introduce yourself while you're at it?
I was going to say that later, but yeah, I can while I'm up here. So I'm the infrastructure branch director for FEMA on the wind event and the earthquake. And so my position is I'm the lead program manager for the public assistance program for both of these major declarations that were made by the president. So I get the awesome opportunity to work with Christina and have a great, amazing staff that works for me. And just really want to also say, I can't say enough good things about the state of Utah and their staff. They are amazing and the breadth of knowledge that they bring. And they are your resource after FEMA is done with writing the project worksheets. So they are there for you always to answer your questions once we finish up this initial part of the recovery phase. So.
Okay, let's talk examples. So it took a long time. It was both events were a ways back. Now we're here a year later on the earthquake. So a lot of repairs have been completed. Absolutely, FEMA doesn't want to slow things down. So this is my picture. It's just some roof, the high wind event, roof shingles that blew off. Not a big event, gosh, just going to put it back the way it was. This concept that I'm going to, so it's I don't know, 3 foot high and 4 feet wide set of Class A asphalt composition shingles, right? That's how detailed it is. And this is the concept of a DDD. It's a damage description and dimension. And this is really what Carrie and Kevin are going to talk about later. But it's a critical concept in the public assistance funding. So it's wind damage. It's the asphalt shingles. It's the size. It's what it is. It affects everything, this DDD, from here on out, because that determines what restorative pre-disaster is. So pretty simple damage, you put it back the way it is. So then you say, okay, here FEMA, here PDMG, here's my materials, labor, and equipment invoices. And that on our chart is the little box that's labeled A, okay? Okay, so this is another piece that's like work is already completed, and it's some water heaters overturned in an earthquake and damaged. So the DDD, the damage description and dimension, is going to say 2 of them, and it's going to say the gallons, and it's going to say whatever else is pertinent to water heaters, and it's damaged or destroyed, whatever. Okay, so quantity, size, is it destroyed? What's the damage? So they put them back the way, they stood them back up there, got new ones, put them back in. And then they finished. So then they have their materials and equipment and labor invoices. And that's the project is formulated to restore to pre-disaster. But gosh, it would be really good to add some of this strapping down here in the corner. So it doesn't happen again, so they don't fall over again. You know, at any point for earthquakes, you know, you can have an earthquake and that can then have one, that doesn't mean that was on one fault. It doesn't mean the fault next to it's not gonna, you know, shift that tomorrow. So, hey, let's put it back better. So we think it's really good. We only want to do it. We only makes sense to put it back better, but gosh, I didn't know I could. But now here a year later, I really could go add that strapping without undoing anything. FEMA only pays once per damage. So, but as long as you don't undo any completed work, it can become add-on 406 PA mitigation. So either now or once it gets to our queue, we'll reach out and you can say, yes, I want to do that. If you give a line item, scope of work and cost estimate, including engineering for anything that costs to design that strapping for any special circumstance, then we can do add-on mitigation and fund that piece. So we're going to use steps A and steps D. Remember, I told you you could mix and match. FEMA has a lot of really good building science documents. This is from E74. They have hundreds of things for different conditions. I really recommend FEMA.gov, and that was in the link in one of your handouts. All right, let's talk this one. This one is actually in Napa. And it was interesting because there was these two unreinforced brick masonry buildings, which they are known for collapsing onto the sidewalk, the sudden brittle failure. There were two of them actually that were pretty close together, and one already had this parapet strapping and it did fine in the event. It was a couple blocks away, and this one did not. So, okay, we didn't know about the FEMA program, the 406 program, so I already put it back. We needed to get that opening, and we just put it back exactly the way it was. So it's a parapet damaged. Let's just talk the parapet and not, let's simplify it, not that lower piece of window. So you're gonna do the DDD, the damage description and dimensions. How much, how long is it? How high is it? Is it two widths or one width? Is it unreinforced? What is it, right? Is it have a concrete cap? What is the problem? So, okay, I know FEMA's coming into town, or I just think that I know this will work, and maybe FEMA will get, the president will declare a disaster, but sometimes it takes a while. So I'm gonna take this informed choice, this informed risk of putting it back with the bracing. Okay, so you fixed it, you've incorporating some kind of bracing, and this can be designed by your engineer. There are some standard details, but it depends on the height of the parapet. And if you have access into the roofing to add these through bolts with washers, or there's other kinds of wedge anchor things you can do depending on if this is brick or concrete block or concrete tilt up or whatever. There's a lot of engineering pieces to go with this. So you track that and you have your materials, labor, equipment, the contract, whatever, and you tried it and you say, well, I'm going to set myself up for success. I'm going to separate out all of these line items that have to do with the parapet, because I'm going to go and ask for 406 PA mitigation funding. So officially, I know it's an official term, I'm going to try to back into it. And so if you keep all that adequate, once we get set up and developing the project, you can hand FEMA the package and say, hey, yeah, I think, I want to do this mitigation, and then we'll check it, try to back into it for cost effectiveness and address will it work and blah, blah, blah. And so you'll provide any, all of those costs. So that's an informed, I want you to make informed decisions. okay, here's the ceiling, typical T-bar ceiling that collapses and in an earthquake. So how many square feet, what kind of ceiling, the DDD, you should be getting good at this. But it's not completed yet. You're gonna try to figure out, okay, I'm gonna figure out a line item, scope of work, and a cost estimate to put it back exactly the way it was. Now in the process, and Kevin can deal with it, talk about it a bit more, but FEMA puts it back to pre-disaster, and FEMA has mechanisms to cost estimate all of this stuff as you go through this process. But it behooves you to get engineered stamped estimates, because it gives you more options early on and in your formulation of your project. So we do the line item, scope of work, and cost estimate for restorative pre-disaster. You evaluate for the code triggers in B. Likely there is none. If this had been broken glass next to a door, then that's where you would have funded the, put back the tempered glass. Tempered, I remember the word. Then you think about, okay, what's the line item and cost estimate for that? So how much of tempered glass is that going to cost? Then you can evaluate for the 406 PA mitigation. You know, is there extra bracing? Can we help with the lights and put some extra bracing in? Those kinds of things, and consider that funding. So then you say, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to add this many braces and at this cost each, and we want to apply for 406 mitigation upgrades. Again, upgrades, strengthening, not improved. All right, so let's go complex. This was supposed to be about complex. So this was a flood rain event, and this is a super, super narrow canyon along the length. And also, this is also a choke point where it gets even narrower. And this is a big highway that was running through the canyon. You know, we put the roads right at the level of the river, and sometimes they come to be at the same height. So the bridge structure kind of remained in place. It's still there, but it didn't have any access roads. So they redesigned it, got an appropriate length, and then I think they repaired most of this embankment. I don't think the channel permanently widened. I can't remember. Lori did this project, who works with me. So they did all the design, figured out what they want to do. They had codes and standards required, and then 406 on top of it. So the DDD is going to be a single span, 11-foot wide by 48-foot long bridge, pre-stressed double T girder structure on concrete abutments, on spread footings. And the cause of damage is debris-laden, high velocity flows overtop the bridge, damaging the structure, scouring behind the abutments, and washing away the approach road embankments. Okay, so gosh, I know this chart. So we're going to go look at restorative pre-disaster. We're going to look at eligible codes and standards. They did not do 428 on this one. Okay, 406 funding. This is the way it's kind of found that it's pretty cool to set it up this way. Here's your line item cost estimate, right? That you're going to come at. In this case, it's a bid, but it could just be an engineer's estimate stamped and signed. Then you say, okay, here's all the things. And I recommend that you do this piece with the gray. This is what I want to get to. This is really what we want to do. Then break it out. Okay, these line items and these quantities are the restorative pre-disaster cost or form and function cost. Okay, these line items were the ones that are required by code upgrades. So they're different, right? You add and subtract. And you may have, like this one had $800 to restorative pre-disaster for the health and safety, the aggregate base course. You have $1,800 for the aggregate base course, and then, but we're going to add more aggregate base course to $5,600 based on the codes and standards requirements. So you've got a total of 18 plus 56. Then all those items that could be considered 406 mitigation can be can be added as well. And then anything that's not eligible, what we're going to call an improvement. If you really, really, really want beautiful gold-plated brick veneer on your abutments, you can have it, but FEMA cannot pay for it. So this is kind of what I would think, something along these lines for a line item, scope of work and cost estimate. Okay. So this is another one, and so this is how, oh, this is the same one. Sorry, this is kind of a summary. Here's what the bridge is. The DDD documents all the damage components. And this is what you do, the things you have to provide to get FEMA. This would be the package that you hand to FEMA. So we're using steps A, B, D, and E. Let's see if I've missed anything. So,
I was to say, and Christina, just adding in here is, this kind of does go to what Will's two questions were kind of alluding to. Doesn't FEMA want resiliency? You know, don't they want to bring things to codes, as other people were talking about? It's an absolute. It's looking at those pieces, correct, as to this is what it was, or that this is what it is to put it where it was. This is what it is to put it to codes. And then this is what it is to add that 406 mitigation, and then all the extra pretty things that you'd like. I call those the pretty things. So that kind of comes back around to those questions about the codes and about the resiliency, that you really are trying to work towards that.
So I've got a message. Can everybody still see my screen and see the different changes? Yes, okay. I see heads nodding. And so when we talk about will it, you know, the 406 mitigation, will it work, right? You're addressing the damage. The damage in this case, we did some mechanically reinforced, stabilized on the approaches, I believe. And so will it work? Well, we knew the cause of the damage is the water kind of went around the bridge too and washed out the approaches. So that's going to armor that. So you can say it's going to be, and it was this was a bigger project in the end for the whole corridor, but it will reduce or eliminate similar damages from a similar feature event by providing a larger opening under the bridge, armoring the abutments, stabilizing the approach road and integral ground. And it will reduce the susceptibility of debris and erosion damage, as well as provide increased flow capacity. The mechanically stabilized backfill contains the support approach road integral ground. That means that's kind of the definition of these kinds of facilities, is you have you have to have the compacted soil or on a pipe, the cover on a pipe. That's part of the damaged facility, because you have to have that cover. And I think that's it. So gosh, you're going to know this chart in your sleep. We're trying to get the engineering solution that addresses the cause of damage to fit within the policy. And you've now seen this. And we go back to buildings. I want to flag for earthquakes that FEMA does have a specific eligibility criteria and for evaluating and repairing earthquake damage for welded steel moment frames. That was the Northridge threshold breakthrough project, that the full penetration welds that we had designers have been using since the 1950s for all of these buildings. They all cracked. And I had, my coworker had a brand new building, Cal State Northridge, that they were just about ready to occupy, and almost every single one of their welds cracked. And that takes removing some of the, like the suspended ceilings and stuff, to be able to go inspect the weld. So there is special guidance, and it's, in the PA PPG Appendix C, and then inside the PA PPG in the text, there's a link for recommended post-earthquake evaluation and repair criteria for welded steel moment frame buildings. It's FEMA P352, 352. So that brings up the other thing. We have an open mic. He, Rudis, you have an open mic? Let's see.
Amber, do we have a way to close people's mics?
Yes, the host should be able to close those, Christina.
Oh boy, more work.
It's Trudis.
Trudis.
During his restraint and secured by the restraint please.
Remote control, no. Hide video, computer sound.
Tina, I think if you click on his icon on the three dots, you can.
Got it. Thank you. Okay, so a lot of these buildings are going to have damage, especially drywall damage. I've seen the pictures and stuff. Next to like a discontinuity, maybe it's a taller open entry on a school to it conjoins to the adjacent section of building it may be a structural separation, it may not be, whatever, but there may be cracking of that drywall. To me, I want to go see to make sure, I don't know if it's a steel building and maybe there's a weld, or maybe there's something else there in that discontinuity. FEMA will not, if you go investigate it and open something up and no damage is found, FEMA will not reimburse for that. So it's that finding that balance of, how much do I suspect the hidden damage? And that's where, again, really good structural engineers can kind of make some informed decision-making.
Christina, can I ask a question real quick?
Of course.
Back to the building codes and the existing building code that you're alluding to here. The state of Utah, we're around 6 years behind with the international building residential code for adoption, as well as the building codes is usually now, it's actually extended to 4 years till it's adopted. I don't even believe we've adopted the international existing building code, which would probably be good for us to look at. But with that being said, again, we just go with the most applicable code, as I hear from you, is the most current to build for resiliency.
No. So FEMA's commitment to resiliency has been that they have set up this DRA, Disaster Recovery Reform Act, and requiring buildings to come up to current, most recent published code, okay? When it's triggered, only when it's triggered, okay? So that substantial damage is a big trigger. There's a few pieces of that. The tempered glass, say. And it addresses the damage elements. And for right now, public assistance is doing those facilities that I talked about at the very beginning, only those, and they will come up to the most current code. Let me find those facilities really quick. Bear with me. So buildings, electric power, roads and bridges, portable water, and wastewater facilities. And in that policy, which is in the attachments, the last page shows, like for roads and bridges, which codes, because there's a lot of them, that FEMA is going to enforce right now. I think eventually, as the building code, as codes and standards evolves within FEMA, and we get the capacity, they will do more facilities and change the codes. But so for buildings, it is the ICC codes and the ASCE 24 and ASCE 7, those are the standards. ASCE 7 is the design requirements for a new building per se. So specifically the International Existing Building Code. So for a building, if it's triggered for FEMA's grant to be approved, those triggered items have to be included in the building. If you went the other way and you said, and I think there may be something in Utah that does this, that we are not going to ever put a suspended T-bar ceiling back without the proper diagonal bracing and the lights braced, right, for a seismic. And you have met the 6 criteria and you have adopted it, you have enforced it, you have you used it consistently. Anyway, those specific 6 criteria, then even though that ceiling upgrade may not have been triggered by the code, your local code and standard is more resilient, more conservative, more stringent. So then we would fund that piece of it. Does that make sense?
It does. I just wanted to see if we was in trouble because we was behind in the adoptions. But it doesn't sound like it.
So it does affect other grants for public assistance. In FEMA, there's the mitigation HMGP, Hazard Mitigation Grant Program that Kevin talked about, but specifically the BRIC program. There's a new program, Building Resilient Infrastructures and Communities. It's a mitigation grant. It's nationally competitive. Utah does fairly well with it. Kathy and Ember, it did really good. They did a whole bunch of applications. It was just in January, and I think that notices are coming out by fall. But those projects are rated on how Utah is doing on adopting codes. So some places don't have any codes, their grants are going to go lower on this rating scale. Okay.
Thank you, Kathy.
So let me get this back. Let's talk about this one more time. We've seen it. We remember this is Marty. He's from EHP. You guys have all talked to him probably on the RSMs. Don't tell him I put him in. But he's the historic, he's architect, super smart, and he's a historic preservation person. So we always have to remember any of the environmental historic preservation, it all has to comply with all the federal laws, and because it's a federal grant. We know that if it's in a floodplain, there may be NFIP triggers, right? It may be substantially damaged. Of note is like substantial damage, substantial structural damage, the 50% rule for the repair versus replacement, all of the denominators are all figured differently, okay? So you have to go read that section every single time. Then in this area, we might have IEBC triggers. There's earthquake and wind and snow if you have a snow event, but there are both triggers. And so you need to look at those and evaluate. It's the applicant's responsibility to present whatever code sections you're going to use, which ones are triggered. And I think that's a good thing because it, again, engages the local engineers and construction professionals who know their area. I'm pretty good. I can do design in some, like California, I'm super good at, but maybe not Utah. But you guys, there's all sorts of unique circumstances. So I think that's a good thing. Then we have the 428 program. That's a really special one, like the 50% rule. There's a lot of documentation, coordinate with FEMA early. The PA repair versus placement, again, that's a consideration. These C and the PA repair versus placement don't happen a lot unless it's a really, really huge event. And then there's the 406 mitigation funding, which is 15% rule, 100% rule, and BCA. Those are all in the PA PPG. You're getting used to my lingo now. And in Appendix J is the 100% rule. And then anything left is improved project. Okay, so what does all this mean? Even before an event, is declared, you are empowered to make informed decisions so that you can take appropriate risks on what you want to go ahead and repair, what you want to wait for, all those pieces. The accurate damage description and dimensions, it's critical to the project and the funding. It just sets up what the restorative pre-disaster condition is, and that funding is what everything else is based on. So an applicant's engineer and the applicant, can help define the damage description and dimensions, which leads into what's coming on the next slide, after the break. You can identify, evaluate, apply code triggers, apply the code provisions and potential 406 PA mitigation measures. I say 406/PA, they've changed the title in the PA-PPG to Public Assistance Mitigation. Everybody else knows it as 406 mitigation. So I am at Region 8, we are transitioning and using both, using that slash so that we're all on the same page. You can provide the line item scopes of works and the cost estimates. If it's engineer stamped and signed, that puts extra gumph on it being a reasonable cost and appropriate historically, and all of that for FEMA to then validate. You can consider fixed cost and repair versus placement, but you need significant coordination, and FEMA can provide special project-specific technical assistance at any time. You can talk to your PDMG. I'm going to put my contact information up. We have a really good team, and that's where we're trying to do is kind of empower during peacetime, which is, this isn't peacetime, but for the next time, so that you can come into FEMA with a package and say, here's the physical site. I know I have to do all this forms, meetings, documents, yes, but the physical site, this is what we want to do. You have the DDD, here's our scope and cost estimates, and then FEMA validates instead of formulating and cost estimating. This will significantly speed up the process, and it gets more of what you want, and it increases resilience. So it results in a safer, more resilient facility. So here is, and this presentation will be afterwards, we've set up a kind of a unique thing for your disasters for the wind and seismic event. Myself and Sean McGowan are mitigation building project advisors. Sean's been on a lot. He's also structural engineer. He's the Region 8 Earthquake Program Manager. And so all of your buildings and things, we will be looking at and trying to facilitate and making sure that the code triggers are covered and that kind of thing, and trying to give you technical assistance during the projects. I also have, I've been doing this a while on my own, and then I got some help, and they are awesome. And so this is the mitigation team in Region 8 right now, and they've been on your recovery scoping meetings. You can reach out to them. Your PDMG is the public assistance main point of contact. And so that should really be your face of FEMA, but you tell them, you can email me too, and I'll loop them in, or you can, just say, hey, we need to talk to mitigation about more information. And that's what I have. I'm hopefully on time.
You're doing great, Christina. I have a quick ask of everybody who's here, especially those who are coming from the Structural Engineer Association or other engineering associations with us today. That would be, if you want this information, we will send it out to the applicants that are already on our list. But if you're somebody that's not one of our applicants, you want a copy of the presentation, you want a copy of all the links, please put your email address, your name, and who you're with in the chat so that we are able to get this information to you, because we don't want to leave you without. We wanted that information, if you hadn't done it already, for knowing who was here and what you were doing. And also, a few joined us after Christina started, so you can change your name up in the corner as well on your little word screen or your face that you have going there. up in the right-hand corner. You can click on that and click more and rename yourself so Christina and the others know who they're talking to as well. And I will quit talking for any other questions you may have for Christina. We've got a few minutes.
Yeah, you can come on while you're thinking of them at the after in the PowerPoint. I have the bonus round that I haven't gone through, but it basically talks about the kind of the information of the basics for those different, my A, B, C, D, and E's. So you guys have any questions? You can come on camera or type them in the chat, whatever you'd like. Okay. Okay, don't look at the screen. You're going to get seasick. I'm going to go back to the beginning here. Meow. Kevin, I'm going to turn it over, or Kathy, you guys can decide, do the break piece, and then I'll stop sharing.
Okay.
We can go to break a little early, but Christina, if you wouldn't mind, going back to where you had the cost estimate and you broke it down into those columns.
The spreadsheet?
Yes. There. You know, this is kind of why we wanted to start this presentation now with you all and to start this conversation earlier, because on this project in particular, if we would have had this conversation with these applicants a lot sooner and laid it out this way, we would have been able to, you know, help them with their recovery a lot faster. And so we're taking a lot of those lessons learned that we've had over the years and trying to put them on the front end to educate you all and empower you to come to us with, you know, how we kind of need it presented to us in order to make sure that we get things in the right bucket. So I keep using the term buckets because putting it in those columns there allows us to understand where we need to put the funding to make it eligible. Because while you might want to put on the gold plate or you want to make it really nice and shiny and all of that, and that's really not into FEMA's our mandate there. You can still do that, but we want to try to see what we can do under our mandate and our funding opportunities before you get to the shining. You know, if you had Formica countertops and you want to put in granite or quartz, that's probably not an upgrade FEMA's going to do, but we can get you up to that point where you can then make those design decisions. But you know, whether it's in this format here or something similar, this is kind of how we need to look at the projects and putting it back to where it was. What are those codes and standards? And please make citation for them too, so that we can just reference there. We can just kind of, again, validate that what you're doing is in there. And this allows us to talk apples and apples here. You know, it really comes back to, we need to agree on that scope of work and the damage description and dimensions. And then we really start to make those other conversations about mitigation, or is it an improvement on there? I see it can be an example. I don't know if Christina or Lori have this in Excel, or if we can, will be available after the presentation today. We will, the state will be posting it on their hub site.
Yeah, and I can't give it to you in a spreadsheet. It's just not ours. So that's why I really, it's kind of thinking in the terms of my ABC and boxes, and how you do a normal estimate is kind of where I'd like to do it.
Well, and I think that we'll be sending out the hub site links and all that information. So it's pretty simple overview that they could each type in their own spreadsheet and fix it that way. So we'll give you the idea. You can steal the idea, make it your own. One other thing I just want to kind of mention as before we head out to our break is you know, you as the communities or as the engineers helping the communities, you're the ones that need to bring up, what are your damages? What mitigation do you want to do? FEMA can't tell you what you're going to do. Nobody can give you that look at it. It needs to be yourself, either if you don't have the in-house ability to look at that and say, what's wrong with my building? What went wrong? What got damaged? To reach out to those who can, and to also reach out to those who can tell you what mitigation would be best so that you would be more resilient in the future. And that's one point that I really wanted to make, because I think sometimes it's not thought of that way, that it is your responsibility, but it does come down to your responsibility as the entities who have the damage, the communities, or those others that are able to apply, that you need to be the one to fully assess and look at your damage, and then to fully find out what kind of mitigation can be done to help you. And then FEMA can help you figure out how to work those funds if they have it available.
Kevin, you want to take that last questions? If you want granite countertops as an improvement, do you get reimbursed for the cost of Formica countertops?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that's probably a good example too. So if you had the Formica, we will reimburse you for the Formica. If you had granite, that's your baseline. That's your initial damage description and dimensions. You had granite countertops in X square feet in this room, and we'll replace, and that goes back to that in kind. What did you have 15 minutes before the event? Was it Formica or was it granite? Now, if you want to go from Formica to granite, you know, because there's not a code that triggers to go from Formica to granite, that's an improvement on you. That's where, you know, FEMA will reimburse to the Formica cost, and then you would be responsible on the above and beyond that to get it into granite or quartz, concrete countertops. I've learned more about countertops since doing a home remodel than I care to share. But that's where that's going back to that step A, is identifying what you had 15 minutes before the event and what the condition was. Moving around there, Christina. Get sick. So that's the important A in identifying that. And that goes back to when we looked at that spreadsheet, all those cost items, it's a mixture of what was there before and then what they want to be at after. And so that's why it's important for us to then take that and identify which column it belongs into. So back to the Formica, you had Formica, it cost $5 a square foot. You want to put in granite, and that costs $25 a square foot. So you're responsible for the difference there.
Oh, it looks like George has a question.
I do. And thank you, Kevin, for answering my question earlier on the chat. But Christina and Amber, and I believe Jessica know all this already, but our church inside has iconography. It is old painted iconography. Like, it goes back to about 1925. And it is not as simple as just replacing iconography in today's world. It is a specific art and technique. And we are in the process now of getting bids on what it would cost in order to replace some of the iconography that was damaged in there. The issue we have is if you replace one icon, for example, let's say it's the big one behind the altar, then the rest of them have to be replaced because they have to, in the Orthodox Church, everything has to match up in order for it to be uniform. So I guess my question is how does FEMA handle something like that? We may not have every icon damaged, but one replacement would trigger the rest of them having to be replaced.
So George, you're super special, and everything about your project is going to be, you're going to get to know Kevin like peanut butter and jelly. I mean,
perfect.
So I don't know that any of us can answer that off the top of our heads. I will be amazed, Kevin, now that I've given you some time to think.
Just to we actually had an iconographer come out, and he met with us. It was Monday, and he came out Monday, and we met with him yesterday. And he went through the church, and he said, yeah, this is quite a unique situation, because he can't go in and just repair what's there. That's not, the person that painted that back in 1925 is now dead. I mean, it's not like he can do it. There is one person in the United States that's good enough to do this, and 4 in the whole world that do this type of iconography. It's Byzantine, it's old, it's very, let's see, how would I don't even know how to explain it to you. If you've ever been in the Orthodox Cathedral downtown, you'd know what I'm talking about. So that's our greatest concern right now, is how do we get, one of our big icons above the altar has a major crack that goes up it because of the earthquake. And you can't just go in and plotch a bunch of paint on there. It's not the way that works. So once again, I guess this is something that I would have to talk to Kevin in further detail, along with some other artists and what have you, to find out exactly how this works. But
yeah, no, and George, that's a great question, and it's certainly something that's very new to me on kind of that historic element there. So we do have, I'm going to give you the textbooks answer here, George, because I think this is going to need an offline discussion for a little more nuanced context there. But we do actually have and this is a lot of what we're talking about today is almost verbatim out of the policy guide, and we're just trying to put it into plain speak here. And in the policy guide, we do have some basic steps we need to take when we have some of those irreplaceable or one-off type of collections and things like that, because it's unique to me. This is my first experience with it, but it's not unique to the agency. We've had other, unfortunately, disasters that have damaged or completely wiped out a unique collection and stuff like that. And so we do have a criteria that we need to evaluate as we go through there. I am a little aware of what's going on with the iconography and that there are specific artists trained to that and in that, and how we can restore it. And again, we'll have to have those conversations about how we can, where FEMA can assist, and where we, what we can do to help you out with that. And that I'm going to segue off of that into, just as a general comment for everyone here too, if you do have those project specific questions, right now I'm not quite prepared to give you those exact eligibility decisions, because I need a lot more information. I'm an analyst by trade, so if I need a lot of paperwork to make a decision. So we can take those conversations offline. Christina, Carrie, myself, your task force leads, your program delivery managers, we can all set up follow-up meetings and have those project specific conversations with you all afterwards. And that was kind of our thought with this, is this should trigger a lot of those conversations for you later on. And that we can, jumpstart this process, because we're starting to get into and this is what we'll talk about next, is the site inspections and how we need documentation to perform those next steps on the work to be completed. So again, we'll take kind of general questions here. And like I said, I'm taking a list of what's going on in the chat to follow up if we need to on questions. And then of course we can talk any of your all's unique situations with your follow-up meetings afterwards. So.
It's time to be back, and we are looking forward to even more great information from our FEMA partners. Really do appreciate them being here and answering all the tough questions and helping us out. So next we will have Carrie Gay and Kevin Hellard, and I will turn it over to them to talk to you a little bit more about who they are and what they'll be presenting on.
Hi, good morning, everybody. I am Carrie Gay. I am the Site Inspection Hub Manager, and we'll get into what exactly that is and how we're going to be performing all of these site inspections. I need to be able to share my screen, Kathy.
Okay.
With
Christina,
just a
do you
moment.
still have control, or is it Ember? Because I can't do the sharing. So you would click on the upper right-hand corner of hers and see if you can make her the presenter.
All right. Thank you.
You got it?
Yep.
Thank you.
Yay.
All right. So I believe you all can see my screen now. Today, we're gonna, after this training, you'll be able to explain why FEMA is performing these virtual site inspections, understand the applicant provided documentation requirements, understand how to perform a virtual, which would be either a tabletop or a remote site inspection, and understand some special considerations that are involved with site inspections and project development. Virtual site inspections, we're going to go over the brief overview on this topic. We're going to describe the different types of virtual site inspections, the initial site inspection discussions, which will happen prior to the meeting. We're going to go over how to conduct these virtual site inspections. We're also going to go over some good and bad photograph examples. And then I'm going to bring up some samples of the site inspection report and the DDD, which is the damage description and dimensions. So the reason we are doing these virtual site inspections now is because of the COVID pandemic. That pandemic really caused FEMA to take a step back and reevaluate how we would be able to perform certain tasks with incorporating social distancing and safety of our staff and applicants. We're moving away from the traditional in-person site inspections. And while we'll be moving away from that, it doesn't mean that we won't still have those opportunities if they need to happen. It'll just be on a applicant by applicant basis and determination of that particular facility. If we can't perform virtual and we have to do physical. This also allows FEMA to become more efficient in the deployment of our site inspectors and to reduce the downtime we have. So the different types of virtual site inspections, we have a tabletop site inspection, which all of you may be familiar with tabletop exercises. You're presented scenario comments and then you react by that. So same style or same intent. We're going to go over the documentation you provide. With that documentation, we're going to review it and validate it. This documentation we're going to get into in future slides. This is the preferred method of our virtual site inspections. We're anticipating that most of these will be done on these disasters. In some cases, we will be doing video conference or remote site inspections. So these site inspections will have the same documentation guidelines. The only difference is FEMA site inspectors will be guiding you through the site inspection via an external meeting technology such as Zoom or FaceTime. This might be the preferred way to do a site inspection if you have no experience doing them with the FEMA process. So for first-time applicants, or if you just don't know what documentation to provide or can't provide it, this is the type of site inspection we would go for. So when is a virtual site inspection performed? These site inspections will be performed if we have small projects, no major EHP concerns, the facility sustained minor damage, if there was a recent pre-disaster inspection report, such as a bridge inspection report. If the applicant, you as applicant, can provide some pre-disaster information versus the damages that were caused as a direct result of this disaster. So if you have an insurance adjuster's report, engineering report, contractor's damage assessment, items like that that show us what was the direct cause and damage of the disaster to this facility, we can write a virtual, or we can do a virtual site inspection, and we'll be able to write an accurate DDD from that. Or if you as the applicant can conduct your own site inspection, or if FEMA can walk you through that process. Like I said before, the reason we're doing this, we can actually do this process more efficiently. So with our disasters in previous states, we would deploy a whole bunch of staff right away, and we'd end up sitting there and waiting for site inspections to come along. So doing it this way, we can actually have the site inspectors plan out and be deployed at that time, get all the work done, and move on to another disaster. So we're hoping that this will be a more efficient use of our staff and your staff. This also creates a parallel production of the site inspection report and the DDD. Excuse me. So previously, when we would perform a physical site inspection, the site inspector would go out and they would write on the site inspection report everything that they were seeing. Excuse me. From then, you as an applicant would review that briefly within the moments that you have at the site inspection, approve it. The site inspector would come back to the office and complete the DDD. They would input all the documentation, all the data, and then you would get it a few weeks later in Grants portal to review. Occasionally, more often than not, there was a lot of rework because disagreements with how the DDD came about, stuff like that. So doing it this way, you're actually going to see the site inspection report in the Zoom meeting as it's being drafted. You will have time to read over the report after the meeting and then agree upon, sign it, send it back, and the DDD will be drafted and written same day. No, understanding that we have everything we need to write the DDD. So as I said, this is a site inspection hub. This is virtual. So all of my site inspectors are actually dispersed throughout the country. And we are responsible for 3 disasters, both Utah disasters and the Colorado wildfires. And any disaster that comes up in the next few months, my team will be writing those site inspections and performing them. So again, myself, I'm Carrie Gay. I'm the site inspection hub manager. I have a site inspection task force leader under me, Gary Lebrecq, and he has 6 site inspectors. And the difference with our site inspectors is 5 out of the 6 are actually Region 8 employees for public assistance. They're our engineers that we hired. One, we have a GIS individual that is training with us and coming up in this program. So before we get into the site inspection meeting, there's going to be some initial site inspection discussions between you and the PDMG. And then also there will be a 24-hour call before the meeting, the actual site inspection meeting, that the site inspector will have with you. And if I'm going too fast, please speak up. I don't have the comments pulled up right now, so I can't read them. Please tell me if I am going too fast, I will slow down. So the initial discussions, these will be after most of you have had your exploratory call by now and your recovery scoping meeting. So the PDMG is getting to understand what your damage inventory list looks like. They're creating your projects and they're organizing what your site inspections will look like. They're determining if you have work to be completed. My team is solely focused on the work to be completed. Occasionally, we'll have to perform a tabletop site inspection for work complete if the project is both, it contains both work complete and work to be completed. But projects that are primarily all work complete, the Consolidated Resource Center in Texas does all of the DDD and the scope of work for your projects. We gather the documentation, send it to them, and they write it. The other part of the initial discussion is what type of site inspection we're going to perform. And like I said, most of these will probably be tabletop. So this will be us going through your documentation and writing the DDD from there. So you guys all should have received a document the other day labeled applicant information, damage information, and inspections. It's a FEMA job aid. I believe this is the applicant information PDF. So this will contain Appendix A, which is your damage information checklist. The damage information checklist is really your guide to getting ready for your site inspection. It will contain a list. This is not the all-encompassing list. This is just a few examples from it. It'll have, you need to provide your pre-disaster description of the facility, current use and location. So we'll need the address and GPS of the facility. Whether you have legal responsibility. If this is a category D, a dam, it could potentially have other federal agency involved in it. So that's something that we need to consider before we're going to write a project, is if you are the legal responsible owner of this facility. What was the cause of damage? Measurements and description of all damaged components, how you're going to repair it, your method of repair. If there are any EHP considerations or concerns, if you have any mitigation requests that you want to do for preventing this damage in the future. And you're going to need to provide photographs of the damage. So we're going to go into this checklist, actually has it broken down by category as well. So it's really a great document for you guys to reference and use when you're getting ready for your site inspection. So under the category A, some examples of items that we would need: debris estimates, make sure they're properly applied and calculated. If you have any stumps or tree diameters, make sure they're properly measured and compared to photos. Debris ground measurements, make sure they're provided length, width, and height. This photo is actually, it might be one of the applicants that are on this call right now, but it's a PDA photo from Pleasant View. It absolutely shows that this is a huge debris pile. I mean, that truck and trailer looks like a little Hot Wheel in this picture. So it's a massive pile. Some additional items that we would need: length, width, and height, and the GPS coordinate of this staging site. GPS location of final disposition of the debris, any hazardous stumps, we need the GPS of those hangars as well, if you have any of those. So for category B, emergency protective measures, the thing that would fall on this that my team would be involved in is writing the DDD if you have a temporary facility. So say, I believe this picture is Westlake, and I apologize for not putting that comment at the bottom of this picture, but the facility is not in use right now. It can't be occupied. So they had to move the school to a new facility. So we need the GPS location and address of that new facility, description of work that will be performed. If anything needed to be worked on to get the facility up and running, the temporary facility, that's what would fall under here, and the capacity of the temporary facility. So for category C, we have roads and bridges. For this, length, width, depth of your road damage, if the facility damage is greater than 200 linear feet, we would need the start and end of that damage area. If it's not greater than 200 linear feet, then we just need one GPS instead of two. The types of materials of the road, whether it's dirt, gravel, chip seal, whatever, describe that in the documentation you send to your site inspector or PDMG. If you have any culverts that were damaged, which I'm not sure if we have any for these disasters, but in the event that you do, the materials and dimensions of those culverts. And then we're going to verify whether this is a part of FHWA. If it is, that's another federal agency. We would look at the type of road it is, and if we would apply, or if it would be FHWA that would fall under this category. So category D, we have our water control facilities. Some information we would need is materials and dimensions. In the dam report, make sure they match the DI line item. A quantity of damages claimed, that it's accurate and compared to pre-disaster design and function. And keep in mind, these are very general comments as to what would be needed. Likely you will need a whole lot more to show your project and what the pre-disaster and how to bring it back to that condition. So for category E, we have a picture of Cypress High School that I pulled from Google. We need the dimensions claimed to make sure they match the insurance adjuster's report. We do understand that sometimes the square footages can be off. So in that event, we're just gonna verify with you what the actual square footage of the facility was and the square footage of the damage or whatever the dimensions are. Dimensions of damaged components, make sure they match the building size. If you have square footage of your roof that doesn't match what the pre-disaster design and function of your facility was, we're gonna have some questions that are raised. Inventory records, number of levels of the facility, roof type, building materials, make sure they match engineering plans, photographs, technical reports, etc. Remember that the goal of my team is to draft an accurate DDD. So we want to make sure we're capturing the damage description dimensions of what the damage caused or what the event caused. And then contents. So the way we think about contents is if you took the facility, flipped it upside down, everything falls, that stuff that falls is your contents. So we would need a contents list and photos of all the damaged items. So category F, utilities, we have a picture of some windstorm damage that I pulled from Google as well. I used RECs as an example. So if you had damaged electrical poles, transformers, any linear feet of wire, that's the kind of information you would need to supply to us. GPS locations of the final disposition, such as transformers. Also, if you have a map of the service area that you can show all the sites that went down, that is something that would be very helpful for writing your project. Maintenance records, you're going to need maintenance records no matter which type of category of work this is. That's something that we always ask for in every project, except probably category A. Inspection reports and inventory. And then our last category is G, parks, recreation, and other facilities. Type in number of facility contents. Make sure they match your inventory list, what you had prior and what you have now. Pre and post disaster photos. If you have pre-disaster photos of your facility, that is wonderful. Something that my team will do during or leading up to the site inspection meeting would be to go on Google Earth and check out the facility. We're going to look at historical photos and hopefully there's something right after where, you know, for major disasters like Hurricane Harvey, they had right before and then right after satellite images on Google Earth. So it was really great to be able to see the extent of damage right away. That's not always applicable for every disaster, but that is a common thing that we do when we're validating your damage. And then of course, GPS, that's a repetitive thing. We need the GPS address, location, whatever you can provide to us to show us where this damage is located. So now we're going to go into conducting these virtual site inspections. So the site inspector will review the information that you've provided. They're going to review your maintenance reports, safety or inspection reports, photos if you had any of prior to the incident, and the damages of the incident. They're going to go over your inventory list, items such as that. And the reason they're doing this is they're going to verify if there was deferred maintenance or not. They're going to make sure that damage didn't exist prior to the incident, that the damage wasn't caused by a previous incident. Remember, this is only damages as a direct result to the major disaster declaration. Causes of damage match the description and photos that you provide. So how this will happen, there's a lot on this slide, and I'm just gonna try to sum it up briefly. So the site inspector will receive a work order request from the program delivery manager. And the program delivery manager will work it out with you on what time and date is available for you to perform this site inspection virtually. So it's gonna be a Zoom meeting. That's our preferred method. And the reason for that is we can pull up the SIR on the screen and share it with you, and you can follow along as we're building it. So the PDMG will send the work order request to the site inspector. The site inspector, once they receive it, this will be a week prior to the actual date of the site inspection meeting. And the day before the meeting, the site inspector will actually call you and go over your damages briefly with you and just make sure that we have everything and we're prepared for the meeting the next day. This is especially important if we're doing a remote a remote inspection via video conference. So if you were going to walk the facility that is damaged, we need to make sure that there's actually connectivity at the site, right? It doesn't make any sense to do a remote inspection if you don't have internet or a way to show us on video what the damage is. So that 24-hour call is just to touch base with you, get some information prior to the meeting, and then the next day will be the meeting. The PDMG will send out a Zoom invite. And in the event that we can't do Zoom, we'd probably do a conference call. And on that meeting, we're gonna have mitigation, we're gonna have the state representative involved, we're gonna have EHP, our site inspectors, and the PDMG. Everybody that needs to be involved in this meeting will be. And of course, the most important person, you guys. During this meeting, you're gonna review the SIR. You'll have a chance to ask any questions or answer any questions that we have to complete this DDD. Once all those documents are validated, and I'll just give an example. We just had one of these, I think 2 weeks ago, and it went really well. We actually pulled up the site inspection report, which I call it the SIR. And we had a chance to go over it line by line. And our site inspector had done all the pre-work for this meeting to happen. So the way it reduces the timeline of these site inspections is we've already done this pre-work. We have our questions in order for when the site inspection meeting comes. So they're gonna open up the SIR, and it may be already partially filled out for you. That just shows that our site inspector actually went through your documents and tried to write the information out as they saw it. They're gonna go over it with you, see if you agree or disagree. If you disagree, we're gonna talk it out and come up with an answer there. If in the event that you cannot answer any questions, a thing that I forgot to mention was to make sure that on these site inspection meetings, you have the right people there. So you don't want your CFO if they know nothing about your damaged site and how you're going to repair it, right? They're the numbers people, they're not the actual engineers of the site. So you want to make sure that the correct people are at this meeting. How they know that what the damage elements are and how you're going to fix it. In the event that we can't answer any questions or get the answers to the questions we have in that meeting, we're we're going to send a follow-up email either immediately after or the next morning to you. And we'll CC the mitigation individuals, EHP, the state, and the PDMG. Make sure that all parties are on the same page with what we still require in order to complete your DDD. That email will have a 15-day turnaround time included on it. If in the event that you don't know the answers or can't answer something, please just specify why. Answer the RFI the best you can. If you need an extension on, hey, I'm not gonna have this report ready for 30 days, that's fine, just answer that and then we can work an extension on that. Our goal is really just to get you to obligation. The quicker, the better. We wanna get you the money that you need to repair. So as I said, the site inspector will call you 24 hours in advance. They're gonna make sure that you have connectivity at the site if you're gonna be performing a remote inspection via Zoom or FaceTime. And even if we're just going to be doing a virtual meeting like we are right now, we're gonna make sure you have connectivity to do so. They're gonna go over the documentation, walk you through it, and they'll draft the SIR while you are on that meeting. The DDD will be drafted after that. Our main purpose of this is to make sure we have all the damage components listed and all the information we need to create the DDD. So as the applicant, you will perform the in-person site inspection if we're doing a remote, and you'll do that with FEMA on either FaceTime or Zoom. You'll take the measurements and the photos as directed by the SIR if this is a remote inspection, or I'm sorry, by the site inspector if this is a remote inspection. And provide all documentation you need. Again, if there's anything that you didn't have an answer to or didn't have the documentation for during that meeting, we're gonna send in a follow-up email with a 15-day turnaround. So now we're getting into some photographs, and we're going to show some examples of good and bad photographs. And this is just a quick guide to what makes a good photo of your damage. So you're going to want to show the facility and the surrounding area. You're going to want to take multiple angles of the damaged elements. Provide some context to depict what this damage is that we're looking at. And you'll see in some of these poor damage photos what I'm talking about. Some hacks that we've found out that, you know, if you have erosion, it's kind of hard to show that in a photo if you don't provide something to indicate the size or slope of that, right? You can take pictures from different angles, but it doesn't really show the same unless you put some sort of object there to show the size of it. Description of location and angle of the photo. So are you taking this from the east side of the damage area, west side, etc.? And then take multiple sides, multiple photos of the different sides of that facility. So we have on here some suggested apps that we use when we take photos of a site inspection. The one that a lot of site inspectors use is Solocator. The thing about this app is it'll take a photo, it'll timestamp it, GPS stamp it, and you can provide some context in the description of that photo. So it's an all-in-one app right there. It's a good tool to use. Another app that we suggest, if you're not sure how to get GPS coordinates, these cell phones are great because they all have apps, right? So My GPS Coordinates is an app that I use. You just open it up when you're in the location of where you want the GPS and you write down the location that it shows on your screen. SurveyCam is another, or really any app that you can use that provides your GPS coordinates, some photo orientation and photo description, that would work as well. So here we have an example of a good damage photo, right? I can see the extent of damage from this site. This is Cypress High School. Something that would make this even better, if we had a tape measure under the cracks or even a quarter in the crack, that would show the width of the crack and the length of the crack. This is an example of a poor damage photo. And as you can see, it's a little blurry. It's taken from the car. I personally don't know what they're showing me damage of. I see that there's a road and a field of some sort, but I can't really decipher what I'm looking at here. So keep in mind that when you take a picture, we're writing damage description and dimensions from that photo. So make sure that your photos tell your story. This is another example of good damage photos. This is some PDA photos from Washington County for the Colorado wildfire. This applicant actually took 4 photos, one from every direction of this debris pile. I know exactly what I'm looking at here. So it'd be really easy to write a DDD from this. This is another example of poor damage photos. Why? Again, it's blurry. The other picture right here is from Hurricane Matthew, showing me a light at a ball field. I'm not really sure what damage I'm looking at here. So without providing context to the damage, we're not really sure where to go. So if the context was that this is actually the repaired photo, some lights broke during the hurricane, they've already been replaced, that would be the context to provide here. And this is another example of poor damage photo. Again, it doesn't really show what we're looking at. I can tell that there's a guy in the ditch. He's probably measuring a culvert or trying to take a picture of it, but I'm not seeing the damage element. All I can see is overgrowth, right? That doesn't necessarily show the picture that you want to paint. Are there any questions on the damage photos right now?
I just want to offer a comment. You know, since we're doing this virtually, these photos are going to be critical to you being able to articulate that story of what's damaged at your facility or at your park. You know, and the way I want to maybe put it is how, you know, think if you were just sending this as a package cold to somebody sitting at their house or in a cubicle in Denver, and could they take away from the pictures what you're trying to tell them? And, you know, we have to kind of recreate. One of the challenges of being virtual is if we're walking around the building, you can kind of point here and there and show this and that, and we can take those measurements and take those photos in real time. And we really do need your assistance in doing that and thinking about it in that terms of what would you point out if we were walking through the building or through the park together.
All right, I think I have some. I'm reading through some of the comments right now. I just pulled them up. This is a pretty good place for us to pause real quick and talk about some of these. So I'm just gonna scroll up, make sure I have the last one. So Davis County has damage to a fence in the September 2020 windstorm. The fence was repaired. Yesterday it was damaged again in the windstorm. Inspection for September windstorm is going to find the repaired fence with damage. So you've already repaired the fence, right? So the damage element would be the first repair. I hope that answers that. I know sometimes going into this, we're coming in a year later, so damage does occur in the future, but remember, it has to be directly resulted to our disaster. So if it was the September 2020 windstorm, your damage has to occur in that incident period. If it occurred after, it's likely not eligible for FEMA public assistance because it's not directly resulting in that damage.
Carrie,
Go ahead, Christina.
is it fair to say that would be, he's already completed the work, he would have the documentation, invoices, whatever,
Yeah.
so there would be no site inspection anyway because it's work completed?
Yeah, so
Okay.
since this is work completed, my team wouldn't do the site inspection. The CRC would create the DDD off of the documentation you provide. So you've already done the repair, you have the estimate, you have the photos of the repair. The CRC would write your project and move on. If you had estimates but haven't really completed the repair yet, that's when my team would come in. And we would go through that estimate, look at the photos of the damaged site, and then write your DDD from that. And that's an example of a tabletop inspection.
And I would just add to that, as the way that she asked the question, that yes, do keep those two separate events and the separate information in two separate files. Because who knows what's coming next? Maybe we have another wind event. I don't know. But keep the documentation, keep the pictures. On a lot of, like when you're taking pictures, if you're doing it with your phone or anything, there are timestamps and there are GPS coordinates. I know if I do it on my iPhone, I have GPS, I have timestamp. So making sure you have that line of, yes, this was damaged in the first event, and keeping that separate from this next event, I think is a big key.
Absolutely. And, you know, we had a series of disasters in South Dakota a couple years back, and the same areas that were damaged in the initial disaster continued to get damaged in future disasters. So we hadn't even completed the initial site inspections by the time these consecutive other disasters happened. So that was really a challenge for us to figure out what storm we're going to put this damage on and what part of the damage goes to which storm. So yes, keep meticulous documentation, keep them separated. Use those apps like Solocator, something like that, that you can take those photos, and if future damage happens, you already have that photo ready for us. Let's see this next one. Regarding drones, given current technological capabilities, are they being implemented for conducting inspections, assessment, in potentially hazardous areas? We don't have any drones. I would love to get some, but we don't use drones for our site inspections. I know in future events we've used like Civil Air Patrol to take overhead photos of the entire damage area. I think Colorado did that back in the major flooding event that happened after wildfires back in 2014, 13 timeframe. It happens with hurricanes. They take overhead photos. Some applicants do have drones and they use them, and we can use those videos to do these tabletops. But FEMA, personally, we don't have the capability to use drones. It's a great question.
Chime in, Carrie, real quick.
Yeah.
This is one of the reasons why we brought in a GIS specialist into this. So John, if you have a drone and you want to pilot something, we're already doing a lot of new innovative things with this in a virtual environment anyway. So let's get together, you know, when that time comes, and just see what you guys have as far as the equipment and technology, and can we get that plugged in with our specialists as well, because it is one of the, you know, we need to look at what are the future ways of doing this, and you bring up, you know, a good thing in there. If there's a hazardous area that we couldn't access from, you know, by putting boots in one day we will put boots back on the ground, and we may need a drone to help us get into those areas. So, but like Carrie said, we don't have drone. We aren't able to provide drones. I wouldn't even know how to fly one myself, but we're we're more than willing to take on that challenge. If you've got it and you want to work through that together. So, and I'm just going to real quickly touch on the couple other things there. If you've provided a lot of the information already, and that's where your PDM, your program delivery manager, is going to work with the site inspector and you to not have to, we're not asking you to, we don't want you to uploading everything 2-3 times in there. So if you've already uploaded it, there's ways that we can get that information to the site inspection team through there. And I think Carrie already kind of touched on what they're going to use. They're going to look through that stuff ahead of time. And as far as maintenance and maintenance records, there is no one size fits all answer to that because it kind of differs on the facility. So if we roll out to a culvert and it's all rusted out, clearly there hasn't been maintenance on there. And is the damage as a result of the deferred maintenance, or is it a result of the event? And if it's a rusted out culvert, it's probably because of, haven't gotten around to replacing that. Something might be as simple as a summary of the work orders that have been ordered and completed for that facility, just to show that you've kept it up. You know, a window gets broken out, you've gone out and replaced that, you've taken care of that. Fence line, using that example, the wooden fences tend to fall down in sections because they've eventually rotted away at the posts there. So just showing that you've gone out and you've repaired your fence as it's blown down in other events. Living in Colorado, you guys are in Utah, the wind blows quite often and quite fiercely. So it isn't a one-off event that you have some strong winds that might take down some older fence lines in there. So I hope that kind of helps through that answer, but we have to kind of look at what the facility conditions are there too. Another example that comes to mind real quick is rural electric co-op showing their maintenance, that they've cleared the right of way from vegetative materials to keep the lines safe from being snagged from falling tree and debris there. So with that, I'll let Carrie get back on so we can try to stay on track here too. I think I see some other questions coming in. We'll catch those at the next stopping point. Thank you.
All right. So moving on, we've talked a lot about the site inspection report, and I'm going to show you that in a few more slides. But part of that site inspection report and building your project are special considerations. These special considerations are EHP questions, mitigation questions, and insurance. So the insurance question would be, do you have insurance on this facility? It's a yes or no question. If you do, you'll need to provide your insurance documentation. EHP, it's probably the most questions on the site inspection report for special considerations. These questions on these slides are actually verbatim from the site inspection report. And these questions have been involved in every project prior to grants manager. This is normal questions for a project to move forward to obligation. And something about EHP, this is the one area that can stop your project from moving to obligation. So we want to make sure that we answer these accurately. So is the damaged facility located within the floodplain, and or does it have an impact on the floodplain or wetland? Can this project site be impacted by flooding? Will work occur within 200 feet of the waterway or water body? These are yes or no questions. If the answer is yes, there's a comment box below that during this site inspection meeting, the site inspector will go over these questions with you and you will have the opportunity to answer them right then and there. Will the proposed facilities, repairs, reconstruction change the pre-disaster conditions, including construction of an access road, establishing a staging area, or other work outside of the constructed right-of-way? If yes, describe that work. Is the damaged facility located on a local, state, or national historic register, or is it locally recognized landmark? Is it more than 45 years of age? So on the site inspection report, right at the top, we're going to ask you when the facility was built. You're going to give us that information. We'll be able to answer this by the time we get to the bottom of it. Some more EHP special consideration questions. Are there any large undeveloped or undisturbed areas on or near the project site? Again, yes or no. Are there any hazardous materials at or adjacent to the damaged facility? Are there any other environmental or controversial issues associated with the damaged facility and or the work item? And the last but not least, and probably our favorite question, are there any known endangered species in the work area? That is very, very important to answer. We don't want to hinder that process at all. So the quicker we have the answer, the better. So 406 mitigation, special consideration questions. This is the part where if anything can be done to prevent future damage to this site, this is where we talk about it initially and prepare some of the other staff for creating these mitigation proposals. So identify the specific cause of damage, what can be done to prevent the damage in the future. And like I stated earlier, the mitigation individual will be on this site inspection meeting. So they're going to tell you what some preventative measures may be as applied to your site. And that's what we'll put in that comment box. Does the applicant plan to perform these mitigation measures? If the answer is no, that's fine. But if you are interested in mitigation, we would select yes. And then we're going to ask you if you want to prepare the mitigation proposal or if you would like us to prepare it. And the reason that question is important is the way that the project works its way through the system. So if you say you're going to prepare it, you will get the project before it goes all the way to funding, and it'll sit in your queue until you complete the mitigation proposal. So if you would like us to complete it, we have a staff that does that, and we can do it as a system.
Carrie, one of the quirks for the 406 in grants managers, we can't see it when it goes to the applicants. So we would like you to just say that FEMA will prepare all of them, and then we'll give you technical support and work with you. But we've had some issues having some get lost within the tool because we can't see them.
Absolutely. And remember, this project, our PDMGs are going to work with you every step of the way. Our mitigation staff will be with you every step of the way, as well as EHP. So just because it says we're going to prepare it doesn't mean that you're not going to be able to see what is going on. We're not going to create a project for you and you'll open it up and say, I have no idea what you're talking about. I'm not doing it this way. So keep that in mind. All right, now we're to our site inspection report and DDD development. So again, we're going to use the site inspection report to upload that data into Grants Manager, which is our side of Grants Portal. This automatically generates a DDD. So prior to Grants Manager, we would actually write the DDD ourselves, and we no longer have to do that. We just answer the questions that are in the system, press enter, and boom, there's the DDD. It's written for us. And we can input this data either directly into our system through the work order, which you won't be able to see us doing the work order as we're doing it, but you'll see it as soon as it's complete. You'll have an opportunity to review it and approve it prior to it moving on to the CRC. So they just created this contents listing, which is great, especially for buildings, because there's lots of components that are damaged for buildings. And rather than hand jamming in one at a time, we can actually do this Excel sheet that has all the questions that will be on the site inspection report on that one spreadsheet. And you can just do a list of components. And then we just upload it into Grants Manager and the DDD is generated within seconds. It's fantastic. So I'm going to stop sharing so I can share my other screen with you. Bear with me just one moment. All right. So can you all see the site inspection report now? I'm gonna go
Yes.
up to the top. All right, so this is what a site inspection report looks like for a category E building, vehicles, and equipment. We have specific site inspection reports for every type of category of work. So again, this one is just for category E. So we're gonna, there's a spot for which applicant this is, your FIPS number, who the POC is for this applicant, what their title is. We're gonna put the site inspection date. So that Zoom meeting that we hold, that's the date that will go in here. Our site inspector name, whether you have, for us, we got Stanley Culp, we have Joshua Fonte, we have, like I said, 6 individuals. So their name will go right there, whoever's performing that site inspection with you that day. The work order number, like I said, the PDMG submits a work order request. That's the number that will be generated. We'll have that information. And then we're gonna have the damage inspection line item number that'll be right there. Or the damage inventory line item number, sorry. So we're gonna select, this is a building. We're actually looking at a gazebo. We made this up for purposes of this training right now. So we're gonna put the physical location address. We have the GPS coordinates. Whether you have the exact age or the approximate age of the facility. If you only have approximate, that's fine. We can click that. That's just gonna show, you'll see in the DDD how that is written up. If you have legal responsibility, if we're gonna select what kind of roof is on it, the pitch, whether there's a basement, number of stories. This next box shows the facility description, pre-disaster design function, capacity, dimensions, and footprint. So as you can see, this is a gazebo at this location. It's used for gatherings at the H.G. Harder's Park. The park is a 76-acre county park with athletic fields, concessions, picnic pavilions, and playground. This is the size of this gazebo. And you'll see at the bottom of every page, there's an area for you to sign. So all the information on this page is correct. I'm gonna sign it and approve it. And then the recipient authorized representative's signature as well. So the state can sign these forms as well, saying we all agree that this is accurate. So then we go into the site component breakdown. This is where I said we have that Excel sheet that lists all of this information. So as you can see on this page, it only lists 5 or 6 sites. And that's it. We go into the sketch next. So if there's more components than 6, we're going to use the Excel sheet. But you'll see we're talking about this one site. That's all we're writing a site inspection on. We have wood posts that are pressure treated. We have our dimensions over here. There's no GPS here because we have it up above, but we can put it again in these locations as well. The method of repair, we talked about this earlier, things that we'll need in preparation for the site inspection. So are you repairing the pre-disaster? It was caused by the hurricane, the amount of wood posts that we would need to restore this facility, and the unit. These are all, I don't know if this is a drop down. I know on the Excel sheet they're drop downs. This might just be, we have to type in whether we're talking about each or square foot or cubic yards, etc. And percentage of work complete. So when you create all of your damage inventory line items, it's early in the disaster. And sometimes these go on for quite a while. Your percentage of work complete could change as we get closer to the site inspection. So you're going to say if the DI says 0%, and right now when we're doing the site inspection, it's now 50%, that's what we would put there. The type of labor, are you doing this work by force account labor, or are you going to hire a contractor to complete this work? And we're going down for the other areas of the damage elements. Again, signatures. This next page would be if we have a sketch. We're not always going to have that, but this is a location that, say it was a campus of facilities. You could put the map of the campus right here and highlight the damaged facilities that are on that campus, because that project would be that campus, right? And then the next page, we get into our special considerations. So we have our mitigation considerations, which we just talked about. So again, specify the cause of damage, hurricane and wind-driven debris. These are yes or no. If you're unsure, we can select unsure, but we're gonna ask for a comment why. We just wanna make sure that mitigation has all the information they need. And then, like I said, the insurance consideration, do you have insurance on this facility? And then we get into the EHP consideration questions. And this is the final page of that. So once we have all of this filled out, I'm going to stop sharing this and then show you the DDD that we've created. All right. So we're going to take everything off of the site inspection report, put all that data into Grants Manager, into our work order, and that will generate your DDD, which is your damage description and dimensions. So all of that information we've talked about needing prior to the site inspection, this is why. This goes into the DDD. We have the facility type, the building type, the facility name, a description of the facility, approximate year built, location, GPS. Originally there was the number of stories was left blank. So when you generate it, this is what it'll look like if it was left blank. We put 1 in, it'll say 1 right there. The date of damage, this is extremely important. If the date of damage doesn't fall into that incident period, it may not be a direct result of the disaster. So that's extremely important information to have. When did this damage occur? And the cause of damage we have right here. Then we took all those sites that were listed on there, the wood posts, the pressure treated supports, all of that stuff. We fed that into the system and this is what it spits out. So this is what your DDD will look like. Ignore the vinyl flooring. A gazebo, 7 pressure treated wood posts, 12 feet long, 6 inch wide, 6 inch depth. Gazebo was destroyed by hurricane force winds and airborne debris, 0% complete. It'll list every component of that damaged site. If you have a building with separate rooms, they will be listed that way. And I can show you another DDD that shows that all of that as well. So method of repair, these are the questions that come up. There was no change in material, no change in size or footprint. 4 components are work to be complete. They're going to perform this by contractor. Let me pull up another DDD just to show you another example. And this is actually pulled from Grants Manager. So this is not of the gazebo. This is a road. But you'll see that in Grants Manager, this is what we see. We see the site inspection tab, and then we can preview the damage description and dimensions, which appear right here. So we have the facility description, approximate year built. Like Kevin said, if this is more than 45 years old and you did a major remodel, we'll need that year of the major remodel as well. And it just goes down to breaking down each site. So this is a category C project with multiple sites on these roads. So it'll list the exact damage per site. I believe that is all I have. I want to get to Kevin because he has some slides to go over himself, and we can have time for questions after that.
Thanks, Carrie. I think you just keep going with the PowerPoint there. While you're doing that, the question came up that I think we could answer quickly. Will you be providing the Excel spreadsheet for the additional sites?
Yeah, I don't see why not. We can provide that component listing. It's a template, so the thing to keep in mind, don't change anything on it, because if you change stuff on that template, it will mess up us uploading it into the system. So keep that in mind. Don't add more columns because you want to. It has to be that specific format for us to upload it and generate the DDD. Let me get the PowerPoint back up and then I'll share the screen. Do you see it in slide mode, Kevin?
No, it's showing your desktop there.
Okay.
I can try to pull it up here myself. We'll see who wins.
If Kevin wins, Christina, you're going to have to turn it over to Kevin.
How about now?
There we go. All right. So I'm going to go through this kind of quickly again, because we are coming up on time and I just want to be mindful of that. So I'm going to cover two topics, both management costs and I'm going to briefly go over procurement. Procurement is a very, very important thing. But at the bottom of the procurement slides are a bunch of links for you to follow to get more in-depth training on it. So that's why I'm not going to spend a lot of time into it. So we have management costs, and this is simply just getting you reimbursed for your time. So this is available to you, the applicant or the subrecipient, of 5% of your total award. So, you know, $100,000 is what we obligate. You get 5% of that to spend your time, you know, to reimburse you for time spent here today, time spent on your recovery scoping meetings, time spent in your exploratory call, all of your follow-up meetings that you're going to have with us, all of your site inspections that you're going to have with us, all your time spent working with FEMA think of that as your management costs. So it is capped up at 5%. If you've been in a declaration prior to 2017, we had a thing called direct administrative costs, and this has replaced that, and really to streamline that, this covers both direct and indirect administrative time spent on the event. It is closed on actual costs. So if we might do an initial estimate at 5,000, but then you might only have documentation and time reported in at, say, $3,200, we will settle at the $3,200. So just want to emphasize that all the force accounting contract rules still apply. You still need to make sure, if you're going to hire on a consulting firm or have some contracted work out, that you're still following your procurement policies to make sure that that fits in line, the costs are reasonable, etc. Force account, of course, making sure you're paying your folks, and the fringe benefit calculation does apply in here. So do not forget about that, because that is often left out, and that's money that you're paying out on there. So provide documentation to support the time. We do need a summary sheet, something that you're tracking, and we'll go into that. This is subject to deadlines. Management costs do not go on indefinitely. They are 180 days from your last project completion. So say you have a park and you complete that, you follow time, you get time extensions, and you complete that in December of this year, you have 180 days or 6 months after that to wrap up all your administrative time. and for us to close that out. Management costs are 100%, so it's a full reimbursement back to you, and it's not subject to the prevailing cost share, which on both the earthquake and the wind event are 75%. Next slide, if you wouldn't mind, Carrie. And sorry, I am going a little fast here. I'm looking at the clock, just making sure we have time. I go back to what I call the buckets. This is where sometimes things can get a little cross between, is it management costs and does it go to your category Z, which is your management cost project, or does it go on the project specific? So your category E, your building restoration and repair. And so think of it really as what are the tasks being performed? Is it administrative in nature? Is it about meetings? Is it about training? Is it about clicking the buttons in grants portal? Is it about spending that time on that Zoom call or kind of prior to complete the site inspection with us and review that and all of that? Your grant admin. So this will be, the state's going to have various reporting requirements for you. You're going to have to fill out requests for reimbursement to the state because FEMA obligates the money to the state and they disperse it out based on the award. And so it's time spent with that. It's also your time spent putting together your closeout documentation that you'll have to submit to the state for their records. And if it is a large project that will ultimately get sent to FEMA for large project closeout. Your architecture and engineering and project management or construction management, those individuals may be performing category Z management costs, administrative activities. However, because management costs is capped, we want to make sure that we're not overutilizing that inappropriately. And we want to make sure that we're tracking those kinds of activities back to the specific project. And so this would be the time to your engineer or architect of designing and engineering the repair and reviewing and getting the codes and standards that apply in there, maybe putting together proposals for what additional mitigation you want to attach to that project. So if it's really putting together in that design, the 30%, the 80%, or the 100% design, those are architectural fees, and those should be charged on to that specific project or facility. And the best way to track it is to the facility, because we might end up combining facilities into one project. Your procurement process. So this is the time that you'll spend. You may be spending it with your engineer to put together that bid package. You may have to, in some cases, get outside legal counsel onto the procurement process in there. And so that's time spent to that project or that facility. Something that's specific to the project repairs. Somebody's out there overseeing the construction. Somebody's actually out there maybe testing and following up on compliance, permitting or something like that. You're out there looking at, or for your performance reviews as you kind of walk through the construction progress. Your tasks to get the shovels in ground or oversee the construction, turning the dirt, turning the wrench. Those are all project specific tasks, and you want to make sure you're tracking it to that. And for applicants, one key thing is to monitor your contractors. And so you don't just hand the keys over to them and tell them to go do good work. You have to check up on them, and that's part of your time to spend and monitor that contractor is on that project specific. It is funded at the cost share for the project, which is 75% for both of our events we're talking about today. But again, a lot of your engineering and project management can get very expensive the more complicated the project. So while the cost share is different, you don't want to take away your costs that you can recoup to spend on meetings like today, follow-up meetings, and getting reimbursed. So that's why it's critical to make sure you're tracking in there. And again, sometimes these people are going back and forth. And so that's why if you keep that log or a diary, or, it's simply a spreadsheet of what I did related to this project. When it comes time for closeout, if there needs to be a judgment call, at least a little brief description there. And actually, Carrie, if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide, will help us there. So, and I've just kind of talked about this. But that last bullet point there, identifying the activities now correctly, makes closeout easier, or in that brief description. So again, slide, please. Keeping a journal, summarizing in a spreadsheet. We know, the who, what, where, and what they did. The description of task, like I said, will help us if we need to make that judgment call. If it's a management cost admin activity, or if it's a construction oversight activity. It's good to include enough description. We're not looking for paragraphs here. We're looking for, for today, your description would simply be, I attended an applicant all hands meeting on site inspections. Your description tomorrow might be, I had a follow-up meeting with my program delivery manager. And then 2 weeks from now, it might be that you conducted the site inspection on your gazebo. One thing to include in there, and while we might not be in person with you, you might have to go out and travel to this site. And so, in tracking your mileage for your truck or vehicle that you're going out and back and forth to the site. Next slide, please. And I'll just briefly follow up here with what the policy and references on management costs. So it's the change over from what I called, again, the direct administrative cost, what we call just management costs now, was authorized as part of the 2017 Disaster Recovery Reform Act, or DRA, as it's been referred to. Specifically, it was section 1215 of that act. And then we do have, if you're following along with the policies, this is a link to the policy, the interim policy, as it relates to management costs. So if you pull up the program policy guide, it's actually going to refer you to this document for the specific policy information in there. And then procurement. And again, we are running short on time, but I want to make sure that we cover this. And again, the most important thing of this at the end are the slides that take you to the real training. Why does it matter? It's required by law. Proper procurement allows for fair and open competition. We want to make sure that we aren't just giving this to our best buddy, and making sure that it is available to all to compete against. Tool to prevent fraud, waste, and abuse. There is a 2 CFR requirement, and this is a common audit finding, is that we do not follow socioeconomic requirements. And there are some affirmative actions we want to make sure that we take to allow for minority or women-owned businesses or labor surplus firms to compete and maybe take on a portion of the project if it makes sense. It makes closeout easier if done correctly. We generally assume a cost is reasonable if it's been properly procured, so we don't have to get into the question of that. Reduces audit findings. This is probably, if not number 1, it's probably number 2, FEMA's audit finding by the Office Inspector General and the Government Accountability Office is that proper procurement is not followed. So really the fundamentals, you all probably have a procurement policy in place. And so it's just really making sure that you follow that. The state as an entity has exceptions based on 2 CFR, which is Code of Federal Regulations that governs grants. But we want to make sure you're selecting the appropriate procurement method and contract type. And I'm not going to go through all of them, but there's the common out there. But one thing that is a showstopper for us, and I will put this out there as a disclaimer, is we do not accept cost plus percentage of cost contracts. There just simply isn't a mechanism to control costs for the contractor. The higher the cost goes for the construction, the more profit that they make off of it. And that is a no-go for FEMA. Again, the socioeconomic affirmative steps, please refer to that. Conducting a cost analysis above $250,000, we want to make sure that you've done some cost check on there to make sure it's there. And no procurement that's done through no price competition. And this might be when you're selecting an A&E firm that you're doing it based on qualifications, but you also want to make sure you're taking into account cost, because you may have 2 firms that are equally qualified, but one costs twice as much. And if that one costs twice as much, you really will need to document why you chose somebody that costs $100 an hour over somebody that costs $50 an hour. And I know those are probably really, really low rates for an A&E firm, but that's just the numbers I'm coming to right now. you want to select a responsible contract. You want to make sure they're not disbarred, that the principal partners are not disbarred, and you're working with somebody that is, not been accused of a wrongdoing in the past, or if you just know they just do really, really bad work because they've worked with you before, that's another reason why you may not select them, because even though they might be the lowest bidder. And then there's federal contract clauses. And so I bring this up because there are specific clauses that as FEMA, we do ask that you put into your contracts, and those are all part of the links that will be provided in the SharePoint, in the PowerPoint here. Next slide, please. Exigent and emergency, really, this is at the beginning of the event, and these are some exceptions to why you may not follow proper procurement. I just want to lay out the disclaimer, and I'm not going to read this in the interest of time, but a disclaimer is just because there is an emergency declared or a disaster declared, at this point in time, FEMA does not view it as an emergency necessarily anymore, and should be using proper procurement. An emergency or exigent is to that life, health, and safety, facility stabilization type of activities. If you're a critical infrastructure, you need to get the water going. You need to get the sewage being treated. You need to get the power going. Those are kinds of activities. Now, like on the earthquake, we're a year later, the emergency has kind of died off, and we need to make sure we're following proper procurement now. Say the work is complete, but you didn't follow proper procurement. This is documentation and context and the circumstances documenting why this is around there. FEMA is going to want to look at, were the costs reasonable? Did you do what a prudent person would have done in the scenario, in the situation? Again, we do look at emergency and exigent circumstances a little differently, because again, the storm is raging. You need to do something to protect life, health, safety, keep the water going, keep the power, keep the lights on, and save people, right? So we want to look at what's going on there. You can assist us in determining that reasonable cost, because you may have some historical data, or you have real market data that's there. Again, I'm going to refer you to the program policy guides, page 65 and 68, lays out how FEMA is going to evaluate reasonable costs on a contract. And then we do evaluate this on a case-by-case basis. This is not a one-size-fits-all. Again, it goes back to the circumstances, what was going on, the who, what, where, when, and why. It was how it was performed in there. Next slide, please. And this, again, is where I will leave you with, we have an entire team that's devoted to disaster procurement methodology, and they have pre-recorded webinars and websites. That last link on there is a registration for training, and they are actually hosting conference calls right now for the next few weeks, that if you go to that link, you can register, and it is a call-in number. It's unfortunately not on Zoom or anything like that. It's an old-fashioned phone line, but you can call in and listen to what they're presenting on disaster procurement in there. The webinars are excellent, and the resources in there, again, point you to where we have some of those recommended and required federal contract clauses and documentation. So I hope some people were able to put in there in the chat some of the questions, because unfortunately we are running out of time to answer them all here today. We will we'll be documenting them and following up again through the state to make sure that we get any unanswered ones answered for you all. And again, for those of you that are applicants in our events, you have a program delivery manager that can assist you with this. And if there are a need for any of the presenters here today to come on to your individual follow-up meetings to talk about your individual specific projects, they're happy to do that and coordinate that through your program delivery manager. And as always, thank you to the state for what you do and for hosting this today, and for the great partnership we have with you. We couldn't do this without you. So thank you, Kathy. I'll turn it back over to you.
All right, thank you, Kevin and Christina and Carrie. That was very informative, very helpful. And thank you to our mitigation recovery team at the state. They are so efficient. They've already put the link in the chat room. So go ahead and copy that down to go to the hub sites where all this information will be posted. If the slides aren't posted yet, they will be by the end of the day, I believe. And so just make sure you go there. You'll have this great information. And we are all here to help you. So reach out as needed. And we appreciate your time and coming today. So thank you and have a great day.